All right, so without further ado, let's please welcome the first speaker of the proposition side.
Sure. So I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. There has been a growing concern that the ICC is flawed and politicized. The ICC has failed to live up to the hopes and visions of its founding fathers. Judges, I am your first speaker, and today I will first define some of the main words in these motions, then give you my 2 main points to why we propose. So, what is the ICC? The International Criminal Court is an independent judicial body with jurisdiction over persons charged with genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes. As the proposition side, we support regional replacements like the African Criminal Court and the Inter-American Criminal Court as an alternative. So, what are the regional courts? Regional courts are quasi-judicial body that is empowered to make non-binary recommendations. They will set up the different region in the world defined by their geography. As an example, the Asian court, the European court, and so on. They have 3 main functions: the protection of human and people's rights, the promotion of human rights, and the interpretation of their charters on the human and people's rights. So these courts will be funded in an even manner, where all countries following that course have to financially contribute to its budget. Although there might be different conceptions of the law in terms of the religion and traditions, we think it's important to respect this. However, there will be information based on the basic models minimums, such as crime is evil, genocide is horrible. We also think that you can still have Western sanctions to be deployed in case you particularly want to collect these nations in the way that they cooperate. So now let's move on to our first argument, which is why the ICC hasn't been useful these years. So the first reason to this is that the ICC has failed to pursue sexual and gender-based crimes in particular. In the end of the 20th century, the ICC has been praised for expressly recognizing sexual violence and categorizing gender prosecution. The ICC held that rape and sexual violence constituted a form of genocide in 1988. And in 2001, the ICC widened the definition of slavery to include sexual slavery. However, these developments are limited. The ICC, the International Criminal Law, engages sexual and gender-based violence not because it is a crime of violence against women, but because it is an assault on the community. The violation of a woman's body is therefore secondary to the humiliation of the group and relegates women to the role of symbolic embodiments of community. Moreover, in its 15 years history, only 8 cases in this area have reached the trial stage. There is a perception that sexual and gender-based violence is too difficult to investigate due to the victim being irreliable or unlikely to satisfy. So the second reason to the uselessness of the ICC is its dependence on the United Nations. Despite the best intentions of its founders, the very independence and impartiality of the court, so central for any such vital and important juridical body, was flawed from the beginning. The central preambular provision of the court's founding status determined on one hand that the court would be an independent, permanent international criminal court, but it neutralized such independence by bringing the court into a curious relationship with the United Nations system. This relationship strengthened even more when the UN reaffirmed its purposes and principles of the Charter, and in particular that all states need to refrain from the use of force against the political independence of any state. While this reaffirmation may be an important component of any international instrument, its conclusion in the founding documents of the ICC is somewhat puzzling and lacks logic. Now, judges, I will move to why we think that regional courts will be useful. The first reason is the complaints mechanism. Regional courts are empowered to receive and consider communications, which are like complaints. They are the mechanism through which they fulfill their functions to protect the rights and freedoms guaranteed in their charter. The second reason to why we believe that regional courts will be more useful is that regional court will have broad standing provisions. Anyone can register a communication. This includes a state claiming that another state party to their charter has violated one or more of the provisions in their charter. The matter can also be brought for the public good, as class or representative actions under the action popularis approach, which means that the author of a communication did not to know or have any relationship with the victim. This is to enable victims of human rights violations on the continent to receive assistance from NGOs and individuals far removed from their location. Furthermore, it is not necessary for cases to be submitted by lawyers, although legal representation can be helpful. So before moving to our conclusion, do you have any POI? I'll take it as no, and for these reasons, judges, that we are proud to propose.
Okay, thank you very much. That speech time was 5 minutes and 44 seconds. All right, let's please welcome the first speaker of the opposition side.
If I could have 10 seconds to gather my thoughts, please.
Yeah, no worries.
All right, I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, said Martin Luther King in 1963. When it comes to justice, there are zero questions. For the sake of justice, society desires there should be zero tolerance for injustice. Injustice as we know it takes place everywhere and becomes known by many. If tolerated, it sends a message and signal to others that unjust conduct is permissible. Other injustices will follow, and then many more will follow, on and on. It's a reoccurring cycle. Which is why a criminal court of justice is perfect and more than necessary. Before we move on, it is important to understand what is the ICC and why exactly it is important, which helps us understand our case better. The International Criminal Court was established to bring the greatest war criminals to justice. The ICC aims to look into and bring charges against those guilty for serious crimes, including genocide and war crimes, many more. The International Criminal Court's main goal is to help end impunity for those that commit the most heinous crimes that are of concern of the international community as a whole, and so contribute to the prevention of such crimes, which is without a doubt very important. Panel, I will be doing 4 things today. I will start by refuting the prop case. Second, I will give my arguments on the ICC's success in obtaining justice for atrocious crimes that regional courts are simply unable to achieve, followed by my second point regarding the empowerment of civil society advocacy for justice. And lastly, I'll be doing some necessary weighing. The prop case revolved around the fact that there are several bodies that are able to, let's say, check and balance the ICC. However, that does not outweigh all the positives of ICC, of the regional, sorry. So therefore, we only know that the ICC, that the ICC has a lot of bodies that are checking it. Sorry, but without further ado, I don't want to spend so much time refuting their case. I want to move on to my first argument concerning the benefits of the ICC. So the ICC merits careful consideration and thorough examination. Without a doubt, it is a court that aids in ending impunity for those who commit the most heinous crimes in more than 100, to be exact, 123 nations. In reality, the ICC is having a number of significant events that are also largely consistent with long-standing American objectives and objectives all over the world, which is why none of these countries should withdraw the ICC. The following that I'm going to explain are some of the impacts that these nations should be aware of as they interact with the ICC. Bringing criminals to justice for crimes committed within its jurisdiction is the ICC's first and most important function. If the court is to help end impunity and contribute to the prevention of genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity, it is essential that investigations and convictions have a track record of being successful and obtained through fair and credible processes. And over time, the ICC has developed a solid track record. I will take that later. I'll take that now.
Let's talk about how the ICC's main objective is to basically ensure that justice is achieved, but then how do you explain the fact that the ICC failed to intervene or at least achieve some sort of justice on several occasions where many war crimes have been committed and many atrocities, such as for example, the Iraq War, as an example of many.
Actually, I'd like to pause you right there. Right now, I'm going to give solid examples of this idea, several examples that show that this is a fact. So let's go over some to give you a solid idea and to answer the POI. For example, the outcomes of these include German Ganta, who was found guilty of war crimes for killing people and attacking civilians in the Oturu district of the Democratic Republic of Congo. And this was due to the ICC. Another example could be Thomas Lubanga, who was found guilty of crimes against humanity and war crimes, including murder and rape in the Côte d'Ivoire. And Jean-Pierre Bamba, who was found guilty of crimes against humanity and war crimes, including murder and rape, once again, in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And etc. The list goes on numerously. Not to say a number of important trials are still on their way. Among there is the prosecution of Charles Bly Glod and Lauren Gbadou, who were accused of committing crimes against humanity during the unrest following the election in Côte d'Ivoire. But these are just some examples that do not highlight all of its achievements. The ICC also interacts with the communities and victims who were directly impacted, and many of whom take part and support the court in significant ways. The regional courts, however, do not, and I will explain so later on. Furthermore, the United States has made it clear, one of the most important countries, that it firmly supports each conviction reached by the ICC so far. These rulings hold people accountable for violating norms of laws that the US has long defended, such as convictions of crimes against humanity, like the forced recruitment and use of children as soldiers, crimes against women, crimes against sexuality, crimes against historical sites, and crimes involving the targeting of civilian populations. Moving on, advocates for civil society justice are strengthened by the ICC. The ICC serves as a focal point for civil society organizations looking for justice for atrocious crimes. Governments from all over the globe are represented in the annual ICC Assembly of States Parties, ASP, with a network of civil society groups. This yearly ASP includes side activities that draw attention to pressing justice concerns of the day, including recording atrocities in Syria, developing national capacities to prosecute atrocious crimes in Africa, for example. These conversations brings together civil societies, justice advocates, government representatives, and many other things, offering a particular beneficial arena for interaction and access to important government decision makers. If you think about it, with regional courts, it is impossible to do such a thing. With such a small court, events like these that serve to better the court are simply not possible. The court stays very limited and not that professional, obviously putting it at a disadvantage compared to the International Criminal Court. By establishing a fundamental assumption in favor of responsibility for its highly public activity, the ICC is assisting in changing the boundaries of discussion about justice for atrocious crimes. When have we ever heard of a regional court doing so? Tell us, Team Proposition. The court of the ICC and other have contributed to reaffirming that those who have endured and survived heinous crimes need to be brought to justice in the years to come. And in the years to come, it will be more crucial than ever to comprehend and actively support the accelerating effects of the public's desire for justice for atrocity crime. And the ICC performs its function superior to any regional courts. Regional courts only address one region and are less significant and are smaller without a doubt. Around the world, atrocities amount to thousands and millions. There are way too many atrocities in one place to handle. Justice should prevail on a global scale. Why abandon the global tribunal that does exactly this? This is why we stress the importance of the ICC. In this world, justice is finally brought upon us. We are safer as a whole. While with the regional courts, only one region is safe, and not even that is guaranteed. These regional courts are uncommon and problematic. So why not stick with the ICC, who have 20 years of experience and are only gathering more with the help of organizations all around the world? For all these reasons, we are so proud to propose. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that speech. The speech time was 8 minutes and 34 seconds. All right, let's please welcome the next speaker from side proposition.
So I kind of have slow Wi-Fi, so please, if you don't hear me, just interrupt me. That's okay.
In that case, would it be better if you gave your speech with your video off?
I think so, like, I think it's okay now, but just like when I was listening.
Okay, all right. All right. If you start cutting out really badly, I'll just let you know.
Really quick question. Mohamed is actually was cutting out a lot of the POI, so I'm not sure I'll be able to hear him enough to actually like write down things and, you know, just know what he's saying.
Yes.
Okay.
Am I audible now?
Maybe I have a solution. If you take off the earphones, maybe that has.
Really?
Okay.
Okay, let's try.
Oh, not
All
you.
right.
Haajar.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
No.
All right. How about this? If you guys are having trouble hearing him, just send a message in the chat to everyone so everyone can see it, and then I will stop the time and ask him to figure out a solution.
Okay.
By the way, I think someone has entered this. I'm sorry, Batul, you're gonna have to leave this because this is debate about the same topic you're debating next. So it's not it's unfair for you to be here to hear these.
I just wanted to come and ask because we're supposed to start a bit soon. I just want to get an ETA. Are we still starting at that time?
Probably 10 minutes later than that
Okay.
time.
Okay.
Please, if you could please communicate that to your teammates, I would really appreciate it.
Yes, of course.
Thank you.
Okay, so am I audible now to everyone?
Oh yeah, it's much better.
Okay. So I will be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1, go. So basically, I'd like to first start by addressing a very important issue, which is some clarification, because I believe that we were not really understood. Now, firstly, who we believe are the major stakeholders of this debate. Now, firstly, and furthermore, the potential future perpetrators of such crimes. Now, we insist on that because it will come of importance later on. As a model, like the first speaker outlined, we propose a world where instead of the ICC, we'll have regional courts. And what we mean by regional is to be defined based on the cultural characteristics of a region. For example, North Africa, Southern Africa, Western Africa, etc., with each region having its own court. And that very same court will be appointed by the member states of that region. And how we will proceed by creating that court is basically simple. The budget of that course will be contributed to evenly and equally by every member state. Now that we're done with that, I'd like to start with some light rebuttaling because I heard some pretty ignorant stuff from the opposition team here. Now, firstly, they introduced and started the debate with a very strong sentence, which is the belief that we must be achieving justice at any cost, and that as long as there is injustice in the world, the ICC has not achieved its purpose. Now, I find that very ironic because in the POI I raised, it was clear that there are many cases where clearly there was a manifestation of war crimes in horrendous ways, and yet the ICC failed to address these crimes. Then here I ask a simple question. If really the ICC is the perfect structure to fight injustice, then why did it fail to fight these war crimes? Now, furthermore, I'd like to proceed with some problematic assumptions, which is that regional courts solving cases and achieve this justice is simply impossible. Now, I find that also very ironic because there was no explanation as to how it will be impossible for regional courts to achieve such justice. Now, we'd like an explanation on that later on. Now, I'd like to proceed with the new argument on our side, which is the following. the political wave within the movement will influence the decisions taken by the judge. Now, in other words, there is clearly a Western hegemony over the ICC. Now, what we mean by that is very simple. For example, you take a look at the major cases that the ICC has addressed in the past, you will observe one pattern. All the prosecuted people were of African descent, meaning from the African continent, or some very minor Western players. Now, what that illustrates is the following, that the Western nations are protected from prosecutions, which means that the ICC doesn't have the power to prosecute these nations. Now, why is that true? Firstly, let's take a look at some pretty big events of the 21st century. Now, I'd like to start with the Iraq War. The Iraq War is by all means, and according to all international law, clearly an infringement of human rights and a clear manifestation of war crimes in their most horrendous of ways. Yet, the ICC failed to act in that context because apparently it didn't have the necessary jurisdiction. Now, again, this was not the only time when such things happen. If you take a look at the Israeli-Palestinian conflicts, there have been tons and tons of war crimes committed over the past decade, the latest of which was the murder of the journalist, which did nothing but report her job, and yet the ICC failed to intervene in that course. Go ahead.
You are bringing Iraq into this, but Iraq is not even a state party to the Rome Statute.
Well, here is why I'm bringing Iraq, because Iraq was the clear manifestation of war crimes. And you apparently suggested that the ICC is responsible for punishing perpetrators of war crimes. And here, Western nations, including President George W. Bush and Tony Blair of the UK, clearly committed war crimes, murdered 1 million innocent civilians, and most importantly, destroyed the whole country's infrastructure. Yet these people are to this day have never been prosecuted nor even punished for the slightest of crimes. Now I'd like to proceed with why is it this way? Why is the ICC a failure in its nature? Now, in order to understand the argument, we must look at the structure of the ICC. To understand the structure of the ICC, we must go back to the state parties of the Statute of Rome, which are composed of 100-something way in which the ICC finance, meaning that the ICC relies heavily on donations from governments. Now, what that suggests is that the Western governments are the greatest donors to the ICC, and these are actually numbers that you can look at later. With having the Western governments as the biggest contributors to the ICC budget, that causes a kind of pressure over the ICC to ignore the behavior of certain Western governments, and as a result, they will keep on receiving their money. Now, this is basic mathematics with basic calculations. Now, proceeding even further, we'd like to outline the impact this will have on the major stakeholder, the ability to achieve justice. Now, what we mean by achieve justice is for countries to commit war crimes and get away with it. And this was proven over and over again. It was proven in Kosovo, it was proven in Israel, and it was proven in Iraq, and even in Syria as we speak right now. Western nations are at immunity of prosecution. Now, what is the main impact on the major stakeholders, which are the victims of war crimes? We believe that the major impact will be that these victims will never observe justice being achieved, which is something very dangerous and which is the very purpose upon which the ICC was established in the first place. Furthermore, what impact will this have on the regions as a whole and on the second stakeholder, which are the potential future perpetrators of war crimes? If people who committed war crimes are not punished, then we are initially talking about a possibility of further people, other people raising up to commit other war crimes, since they will believe that there is no punishment. Now, this is more of a psychological effect, but it is very likely that this is to happen, especially if we are not severe in the punishment. Why we propose regional courts is firstly, number one, because regions have similar, because a region has countries with similar culture, similar characteristics, which mean that they can interpret the law into their own way and into a most efficient way. This will allow them to make justice easier because they will now be dealing with their own people, with their own context, with their own culture. And this is what we insist on. for regional courts to rise up and for the ICC to fall will allow us to make sure that wherever justice has not been achieved by the ICC, that it will be achieved by these regional courts. And we will go back as to why it will work that way in the next speech. Now, I only have 30 seconds left, so I'd like to use that time to summarize what I said. Basically, the ICC failed badly in the past to prosecute Western nations, and all the prosecutions focused mainly on African people, which here is a clear sign of the Western hegemony over the ICC. Now, again, we believe that regional courts will take away the immunity that the Western powers have benefited from and will make sure that whoever committed war crimes is prosecuted in the most respective and appropriate of ways. That was all, and this is why I believe you should vote for us.
Thank you very much for that speech. The speech was 8 minutes and 13 seconds. All right, let's please welcome the second speaker of side opposition.
That's me. So, Mr. Chair, ladies and gentlemen, the ICC, I mean, we've been debating it all day. We know it's an institution that's integral to maintaining peace and justice throughout the whole world. And over the years, as proposition stated, several African countries wish to withdraw from this justice institution. However, almost every single time, actually not almost every single time that they wished to withdraw, the High Court ruled such decisions to be unconstitutional and invalid. And this is very justified considering the implications, the almost entirely negative implications that would come with this withdrawal. So, you know, withdrawing from the Rome Statute, from the ICC, it undermines international justice for everyone. So I have a few arguments, but before getting into them, I would like to just, you know, talk about some of the things and the arguments that were presented by the proposition and to rebut them. So first of all, and this is a bit of a sensitive topic, I guess, but I think it's worth mentioning. So they were talking, the first, I think, proposition, they were talking about how since the ICC failed to investigate and, you know, judge sexual assault crimes, then countries should withdraw from it. Now, obviously, I don't condone sexual harassments. However, I think it's important to, no, thank you. It is important to note that the ICC investigates large-scale crimes where hundreds, thousands, millions of people are affected. They are mandated to investigate genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes. These three sets of crimes, they're collectively called atrocity crimes. So unless the sexual assault crimes were committed on, no, thank you, were committed on a large scale, so think human trafficking, sex slavery, something like, you know, Jeffrey Epstein's whole operation, that whole island, then yes, it would be fair, it would be valid for them to investigate those crimes. But in, you know, realistically speaking, that does not really happen. So I don't see how the ICC and those types of crimes are related. No, thank you. I think it's also important to mention that sexual harassment crimes are actually like unfairly, you know, judged, and they result, like courts rule on them in an unfair way all around the world. And obviously, I'm not justifying anything, but I'm just saying that this is a worldwide problem that we have with sexual harassment crimes not being fairly, you know, sexual harassment criminals not being fairly convicted, not having fair verdicts against them. So, I mean, I think it's unfair for us to actually, yes.
So basically, I just heard you talk about sexual assault for like 2 minutes or something, yet you have ignored 40 minutes of our speeches when we discussed the inability of the ICC to condone acts of violence such as genocide or mass murder of people.
Just
How
give me
do you
a second.
respond to that?
Yep, I will get there actually. Just give me a moment. Oh, sorry, my mic was muted. So like I was saying, sexual harassment crimes, they are not judged and ruled on fairly in the entire world. So I think we need to condemn the whole world instead of just the ICC. You don't see you don't see, I don't know, like in the US, if the Supreme Court or if the Circuit Court rules against some sexual assault crime, but like it rules unfairly, you don't see everyone, I don't know, boycotting the court or saying that we don't want to be part of the court anymore. So yeah. Also, they talked about how cultural characteristics and how demographics play a role in how well crimes would be, ruled on, and how fairly criminals would be convicted. They said that since the regional courts sort of share culture, they share demographics, then it's going to be more fair. But I think this is completely invalid. I mean, if everyone shares a culture, if everyone shares demographics, don't you think there would be some kind of bias, subjectivity, you know? So, and this is something that I'm going to go back to later on in my speech, so I don't want to spend too much time on it. They also said that the political climate of the time, of the world, would affect how the ICC would rule on things. And so basically, they're talking about how the ICC is biased. And throughout the entire speech of the second proposition speaker, his entire speech was basically about how the ICC is biased. But he failed miserably to clarify how a regional court will eliminate bias. So you say that the ICC is biased. Okay, and how is a regional criminal court going to be any less or any more biased than the ICC? So they did not really bring this, deliver that point across. Yeah, that's about it. And now for my arguments. So first of all, like I stated throughout the rebuttal, several negative implications would come with countries withdrawing from the ICC. So think corruption, bias in court verdicts, punishments, and this is important, punishments and sentences that do not fairly reflect the severity of crimes committed within a certain jurisdiction, and perhaps an inability to reach legal consensus. It's obvious and very logical for us to say that it's very unfair for criminals that commit crimes affecting the world at large, affecting more than one country, to be held accountable only within their own country or their own region, especially since this may lead to their not being held accountable enough. And I think one main reason why there would be a kind of bias in regional or national courts is, first of all, because countries, they care about their reputation, right, among other foreign nations. This is normal, right? So perhaps if a completely independent national or regional criminal court with no regulations placed on it from objective third parties, so like the ICC, any kind of regulations are only placed on it by, that same country's government. This may lead to the downplayment of the significance or the severity of crimes committed by criminals who are citizens of that country, only to sort of preserve the image of the country among other nations. They don't want to give a bad impression of corruption or of prevalence of illicit activities or crime in their country. So they might end up lying, or pretty much lying about what actually happened, so that the world wouldn't really, think badly of them. But obviously the world deserves to know the truth, especially with large-scale crimes that affect everyone and not just, a singular person. And I think an example of this whole like image thing, I think it's relevant, to be honest, but it doesn't really like affect the ICC or anything. So I don't know, but I think it's relevant to sort of demonstrate how image, plays a role in causing bias. So I think we all heard about UAE's Areem Island killer. Her name was Alae al-Hashimi. She was an Emirati woman who murdered an American teacher and then attempted to kill an American doctor by planting a bomb in front of his house. So at the end of the trial, when she had been convicted, sentenced, everything, the Emirati police, they came out and said, oh, well, actually, she wasn't even Emirati. She is of Yemeni ancestry. Her parents are Yemeni, so she's, it's none of her business. She's not really one of us, so it doesn't. So this story, I think it just demonstrates that countries are going to try hard to find justifications or reasons to shift the blame from their own people, their own organizations, and onto others to make themselves look better. This is obviously not to vilify or criticize the UAE because, at the end of the day, it's only natural for anyone to try and make sure that their reputation or their image does not get tarnished among society. So this, I think, UAE example, it might seem quite insignificant in the grand scheme of things, but I think it recounts behavior that would or could also apply to the whole concept of locally, national, or regional criminal courts. They may want to make themselves look better, which will lead to their downplaying of the severity of crimes committed within their borders. And then this obviously will ultimately lead to more lenient verdicts or unfair punishments. And keep in mind that once a country withdraws from the ICC, the International Criminal Court is no longer capable.
I'm sorry, but you've exceeded your time. You're
All
supposed to, yeah, okay.
Okay,
All right,
thank
so
you.
you're welcome. Thank you very much for that speech. The speech time was 9 minutes and 5 seconds. So without further ado, let's please welcome the next speaker.
Yes, that's me again.
Okay, cool.
So I will be.
I'm sorry. Before you start, can we all just turn off our video cameras? Because I think when we do that, it makes the connection easier or more stable. Yeah.
Wait, one question: if we have a POI, do we turn them on or?
Yeah, you can just unmute yourself for the POIs. But Mohamed, you can leave your video on if you want. We'll just all turn off our video to make your connection a little bit more stable. Feel free to start whenever you're ready.
Yes. So I will be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Let's go. So firstly, there needs to be a bit of responses to some pretty inaccurate statements made by the second speaker of the position. Now, firstly, she stated that we miserably failed at explaining why regional courts will be a lot better than the ICC, while I clearly stated in my second speech that I will be coming back to it in the third speech to compare overall. Furthermore, let's talk about some logical gaps in their arguments. Now, firstly, they did not really understand the definition of regional. Why I say that is because they defined regional as people with the same government ideologies. What we said by regional is basically the same culture, the same people, etc. While the governments will clearly be different. It's my protected time. Now, for example, let's take a look at the Middle East. They took the UAE as an example, and they said that it will, whatever happens in the UAE they will not be prosecuted if there was to ever be a Middle East court. Yet I find that very hard to believe, because in the Middle East alone, we've got about 6 monarchies and 4 Ba'athist regimes, which, if you know anything about in politics, these 2 regimes are ideologically opposed to each other. So it will be even more logical that they will try to fight each other in every sense of the word. Now, furthermore, they mostly focus on the sexual aspect of things, which really we did not allocate much time to, and yet ignored a whole part of arguments where we discuss the actual war crimes being committed, such as mass murder of innocent people and the destruction of several countries' infrastructure. Now, this is what we'd like to focus on. Now, why their model will fail overall, and not only will fail, but failed already. Now, simply if you take a look at the ICC's purpose in this planet, you will observe that it is to achieve justice in every shape and form, and for every perpetrator of war crimes and crimes against humanity to be punished appropriately. Anyways, this is their statement. Yet they failed to do so. And as we said in the second speech, many examples illustrate that, such as, again, the war in Yemen, the war in Iraq, the war in Palestine, the war in Libya. And all of these problems have been the result of Western intervention in these nations, where Western leaders committed atrocious war crimes, yet the ICC failed to prosecute them. So this was our main argument, the fact that the ICC cannot prosecute Western nations. And for the only way to actually achieve justice is through a regional court. Why do we say that? Now, suppose we had regional courts for Africa. Go ahead.
Well, first of all, you say that we said that we defined regional as having same governmental ideologies. That is not what we said. We simply stated a fact. We said that if a country is under the same, if a jurisdiction is under the same government or under governments with the same same culture, same demographics, then obviously there's going to be bias in the way that things and crimes are judged, in the way crimes are.
That was 15 seconds. Well, I mean, you have not said that literally, but you clearly implied that, because when you said that there will be same culture, same etc., then who will prosecute these people? Then it is the government of the region. Therefore, if you say that the government will not prosecute these people, it is because you implied that these governments are close to one another, which is an assumption that these governments are ideologically or politically familiar or close with the neighboring nations. Now, you have not said that, but you clearly implied it. Now, going back to what I was saying. What was I saying? Yes. Basically, the ability of continental or regional courts to prosecute crimes. Now, firstly, this will give what we would describe as the weak nations on the global spectrum a chance to actually have a chance at justice. Because when you have, for example, countries as massive as China or the United States or Britain, these countries can never be touched, they can never be prosecuted in the ICC, and that was demonstrated. Now, if we actually have regional courts, then we will be able to put into light the atrocities of Western nations. For example, imagine we had a Middle East Middle East court. What would have happened in the case of the Iraq war? Then firstly, the war crimes committed by the United States will be demonstrated to the world, they will be publicized, they will be mediatized, and even if there will be no concrete approach to the matter, at least we will achieve a semi-symbolic approach which will get us closer to justice, which is something that the ICC failed to even get close at. The ICC failed to even lead an investigation in the matter, which is the greatest insult to justice, and especially coming from people whose main purpose is to achieve that justice. Now, furthermore, in our model, let's give some comparisons. When it really comes down to it, how do you explain the fact that the only nations to be ever prosecuted or only people to be ever prosecuted under the ICC were African people or African states or African leaders? For example, the leader of Sudan, the leader of Angola, and the leader of Congo. How do we explain that? While in the West, there has never been one person, one leader of high magnitude that was actually prosecuted, simply because the ICC cannot and doesn't have the necessary ability to do so. Why is that? Again, we explained that in the second speech, but I'll say it again to outline it once and for all, because the ICC is funded by voluntary donations, and the main donors of the ICC are Western nations in the following order: the United States, the UK, and France. These are the main donors of the ICC. Go ahead.
Yeah, so you said that, oh, well, world leaders, African world leaders are always the ones getting prosecuted, but you need to understand that a lot of African countries have laws that sort of, that make African leaders immune to criminal charges being pressed against them. So it would only be the ICC that would have power over them to actually judge and rule against certain crimes. So how would you justify that? How would you find a solution for that?
Well, I'll go back to that point once again, but then okay, if the ICC can only prosecute the African nations, then why can't they prosecute the American nations, the Americas, or the Canadas, or the French, or the British? Now, there is a valid question that you must try at least to answer. Now, going back to your question, you said that there are laws that prevent people from being prosecuted. I mean, if you go to for example, when we talk about a continental court or a regional court, we're not speaking about the local laws of these nations. We are speaking about continental laws as a whole, and these continental laws will not adhere by the rules of one specific nation. Even if, let's say, a nation says that you can't prosecute my president, then that continental court will have the ability to prosecute that man, will have the ability to call that man to court, because that man will have to adhere to the legal standards and the legal expectations of the court as a whole. Now, again, why we won this debate, basically the emphasis on the key winning ideas from our own team is basically number one, the inability of the ICC to prosecute Western people, Western leaders, Western nations as a whole, and furthermore, the Western hegemony over the ICC as a structure, as a system, as a model. Therefore, we believe that we should win this debate.
Thank you. Thank you, Sorry, 1 second. Yeah, thank you very much for that speech. The speech time was 8 minutes and 15 seconds. We will now have the final speech of this debate, which will be third speaker from side opposition.
Hi, that would be me. Hello. I haven't had the chance to talk yet, so today, let's say I'm not super ready, but I will do my best. I will be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. The proposition team has emphasized many times over the course of this debate that regional criminal courts would be the all and be all solution to all criminal charges that haven't been brought to justice yet. I call this kind of ideology very idealistic, maybe even, if I may, idiotic. Why, you may ask? Well, they cited multiple times the example of powerful nations such as China, America, stuff like that, that is not in the ICC in the first place. And I ask, all right, you want to put regional courts, for example, for China, that has committed many atrocities, that commits many atrocities day by day. Okay, you put in a regional court with regions that have the same culture as it. Let's say, for example, you put Taiwan with China. What will happen then? Okay, we'll put China with Taiwan. Will China be able to be brought forward to justice with many weak countries that are under its jurisdiction? Will countries that have to fight every day for their rights, I think, for example, the manifestations, the demonstrations that occur every day in China, will they be able to be spoken about in a community that is closed-minded and echo chamber? Yes.
Again, you have talked about the powerful nations, and what we really meant was that in your model of this debate, there has been clearly an inability to prosecute these powerful nations, so they will never prosecute them in your model. At least give them a try in this new model. We concede that sometimes it might not work, but at least it will be better than trying on doing something again over again that we know doesn't work. Again, what is the definition of insanity? Is doing the wrong thing over and over again. So if you know it's wrong, at least give us the chance to do something new.
So you think that isolating weak countries with their abusers will be the solution? You think that if we took Taiwan and put it in a room alone with the representative of China, we will find a solution? China will be sanctioned, it will have punishment, and that's what will happen? No, that it will not. That is not realistic, and that will simply not happen. Yes, many times we have said and we recognize that the ICC has not been held to the standard that it should be held at. But what we say is that we should take responsibility. Countries should stop running away from these responsibilities. Not only do we have we proposition that not only should countries be held accountable for their crimes, they should sign the ICC. They should take the responsibility to be held accountable for their crimes. You say we bring a concession about. Yes, the ICC as it is now, with important countries and powerful countries out of it, does not bring justice enough. But creating regional councils where countries that are abusers, who are in positions of power against other countries, that will not be the solution that you look for. It will not be the salvation that you are looking for. What should happen actually is that all these countries like Russia, America, China should all be held accountable and integrate the ICC. Do you have any opposition to this?
BOI?
Yes.
How will you, I mean, you have talked about being idealistic and even idiotic, but here is my point. How will you achieve that when we know that the main donor of the ICC is the United States? So how can you actually prosecute the one who gives you the most money for you to survive?
This all comes to terms with the fact that the system is deeply corrupt. Why do many countries not come to justice? It is because of corruption. Why do politicians do not come to justice? It is because of corruption. Each and every time, it all comes back to corruption. That is, if we manage to put a stop to it. Yes, it is idealistic, but instead of running away from the potential solution that is confronting abusers for their crimes and just improving the ICC, instead of just running away and creating a new regional thing, why not just improve what has already been established? I will conclude my presentation today with the fact that if we brought about this change that is creating regional variants of the criminal court, many countries will use it as an excuse to deviate from guidelines and moral codes that have been set by the international community. For example, I take the example of the Uyghurs in China. If they were to be left alone without the supervision of the international community, not only would the abuse of the Uyghurs be much, much worse and unsanctioned, it would be not even known to the public. I say that as a conclusion to our speech. We have to stop running away and to simply confront the solution, and that is to face the truth. Thank you very much.
Okay, the speech time was 6 minutes and 10 seconds, so I will stop the recording now. Okay.